Some movie scenes cost more than entire films. One reportedly reached $141 million. Another spent $40 million creating hundreds of Agent Smiths. And one 5-minute crash required a 300-ton ship replica. Hollywood can spend millions on just a few minutes of screen time. The reason isn't always explosions or famous actors. Sometimes the real cost is building something that can't normally exist. A flying bus, a runaway cruise ship, a sinking ocean liner. Tonight, we're counting down 7 famously expensive movie scenes. And the final entry takes movie spectacle to an extraordinary level. Number 7. Swordfish, flying bus, $15 million. A helicopter carries a city bus through the sky. And remarkably, much of what you're seeing was actually filmed. In Swordfish, terrorists escape while their bus is lifted into the air. The image sounds like something created entirely inside a computer. But director Dominic Sena wanted the sequence to feel physical. So the production used a real bus. And for exterior shots, a helicopter actually lifted it. That immediately created a serious technical problem. The bus wasn't a lightweight prop. It was heavy enough to push the helicopter close to its lifting limits. One report says the bus weighed more than 80% of the helicopter's capacity. That meant even wind could become dangerous. The helicopter couldn't simply fly wherever the camera wanted. Every movement had to be carefully controlled. The interior shots created another challenge. The actors couldn't simply sit inside a bus dangling from a helicopter. Instead, the production used a crane and controlled setups for those shots. The exterior footage could then be combined with the interior performances. But the biggest shots were still practical. The bus really went into the air, and that gave the sequence something computer graphics couldn't easily provide at the time. The movement of the vehicle looked unpredictable. The weight looked believable. The helicopter reacted to the load. And the entire shot had the physical imperfections of something actually happening. Contemporary reports put the cost at around $15 million. That's roughly 15% of Swordfish's reported $102 million production budget. And there's another strange chapter to this scene. The original concept was reportedly even more destructive. Some of the planned material was scaled back after the September 11 attacks. The finished sequence is still spectacular. But the production had spent millions creating something that audiences would see for only a few minutes. And the next entry would spend even more money destroying some of the world's most recognizable cars. Number 6. Spectre, Rome car chase, $32 million. Bond arrives in Rome behind the wheel of an Aston Martin DB10. Then a Jaguar CX-75 appears behind him. The chase is fast. It's loud. And the cars are anything but ordinary. The Aston Martin DB10 was created specifically for Spectre. Only 10 DB10s were built for the production. The car was never put into normal production. So when Bond launches it through Rome, you're watching an extremely rare machine being used as a stunt vehicle. And the production didn't treat those cars gently. The chase involved high-speed driving, jumps, impacts, damaged bodywork, and repeated stunt setups. Top Gear reported that the Rome sequence involved a roughly 400-person crew. The production worked through the night across Rome's historic streets. At one point, the DB10 and Jaguar had to race down a staircase. That wasn't simply a visual effects shot. The stunt drivers actually drove the cars down the steps. The stunt coordinator expected damage. He even explained that the team expected at least 2 or 3 cars to break. The production had multiple DB10s and CX-75s available for the action, and crews constantly repaired and prepared them between stunts. The scale of that operation helps explain the cost. The cars needed different wheels, different tires, replacement body panels, special stunt modifications, and teams working almost continuously to keep everything ready. The German Insurance Association later reported roughly $32 million in vehicle losses connected to Spectre's chase work. So there's an important distinction here. That figure shouldn't be presented as an official $32 million price tag for the Rome chase alone. It relates to vehicle losses across the film's chase sequences. Still, the Rome sequence itself caused damage worth millions. And that's the Bond formula at its most expensive. Build something beautiful, then destroy it. But the next filmmakers didn't just destroy a vehicle. They built an entire harbor so a cruise ship could smash through it. Number 5. Speed 2. Cruise Control. Cruise ship crash. $25 million. This scene begins with a simple problem. A cruise ship is moving too fast. It can't stop. And directly ahead is land. Instead of relying mainly on miniatures, the filmmakers decided to build enormous physical elements. That decision turned a movie stunt into a construction project. The production created a huge replica of the ship's bow. The replica was about 150 feet long, and it weighed roughly 300 tons. That's not a model. That's an enormous piece of machinery. Then came the track. The ship replica sat on wheels above a track built about 60 feet underwater. The track stretched roughly 1,000 feet. 4 diesel engines powered the system. A huge chain pulled the replica along at around 18 miles per hour. The filmmakers then built the harbor around it, and they needed the buildings to collapse at exactly the right moment. So the buildings were specially modified. Concrete was removed from certain areas. Lighter materials were used where controlled destruction was required. Explosives and hydraulics helped create the collapses. The production couldn't simply hit the set and hope it looked right. The destruction had to happen at specific points. The ship had to move at the correct speed. The buildings had to collapse in sequence. And the cameras had to capture everything from the right positions. The crew used 14 cameras to record the action. But there was another problem. The enormous ship replica couldn't simply be reset after one take. After each collision, debris had to be cleared. Then the sequence had to be prepared again. The final shot was particularly demanding. The massive replica had to stop within about 6 inches of its target position, and according to production accounts, it achieved that on the first take. The entire 5-minute sequence reportedly cost $25 million. That's roughly 1/4 of the movie's entire reported budget. And at the time, it was described as one of the largest and most expensive stunts ever filmed. Think about that. 5 minutes. A $25 million production. And almost everything had to be physically built before the cameras could roll. But next, the problem wasn't physical weight. It was digital reality. Because how do you make one actor fight an army of identical people? Number 4. The Matrix Reloaded. Neo versus Agent Smiths. $40 million. Neo has one problem. Agent Smith isn't alone anymore. One Smith becomes several, then dozens. Then, an entire crowd surrounds Neo. The sequence became known as the Burly Brawl, and reported production estimates put its cost at around $40 million. The reason is simple to describe, but extremely difficult to execute. The filmmakers wanted Neo to fight roughly 100 versions of Agent Smith. They couldn't simply hire 100 actors. They needed Hugo Weaving's character to appear again and again. That required a combination of live action, motion capture, digital doubles, and computer-generated imagery. The technology created a major challenge. The original Matrix had already pushed visual effects forward, but the sequel demanded something much larger. Instead of slowing time around a few actors, the filmmakers wanted a virtual environment where the camera could move freely around digital characters. That meant creating new technology. The visual effects team developed a virtual camera system for the sequence. The computer wasn't just copying Smith, it had to understand the movement of the character and reproduce it convincingly. The sequence took about 27 days to film, and then the real work continued after filming. Every digital Smith needed movement. Every punch needed timing. Every fall needed physics. Every camera move needed to work with the digital environment. And the more characters appeared on screen, the more complicated everything became. One Smith is manageable. 100 Smiths are another problem entirely. The reported cost has been cited around $40 million, while some later sources have repeated higher figures. For this video, $40 million is the safer, commonly cited estimate. And the amazing part is what that money represents. The production wasn't just buying visual effects. It was developing the technology needed to create the visual effects. The Burly Brawl became a technological gamble. Whether you think the result still looks perfect today is another question. But in 2003, the filmmakers were trying to make something audiences hadn't seen before. And the next scene would take that same obsession with spectacle into the real world. This time, the enemy wasn't a digital army. It was a train. Number 3. Mission Impossible. Dead Reckoning Part 1. Train Crash. $21 million. Tom Cruise is hanging onto a moving train. The train is racing across a bridge. Then the bridge disappears. And suddenly the entire train begins falling. For Mission Impossible. Dead Reckoning Part 1. The filmmakers wanted the destruction to feel physical. That meant building real pieces of the railway. It meant constructing train cars specifically for the sequence, and it meant figuring out how to destroy them safely. The production didn't simply film an actor standing in front of a green screen. A substantial physical setup was built for the sequence. The final crash combines practical effects with visual effects. That combination is important. The physical elements give the actors something real to react to. The digital work then extends the destruction beyond what could safely happen on a film set. Tom Cruise's involvement also increased the pressure. His action sequences are built around real physical movement. The camera needs to see the stunt clearly. The audience needs to understand what is happening, and the stunt has to be repeatable enough to capture different angles. Published estimates have placed the train sequence at roughly $21 million. But again, that number should be treated as a reported estimate rather than an official studio line item. And the cost wasn't simply the train. It included construction, stunt preparation, special effects, safety systems, cameras, crew, and the enormous logistical operation needed to destroy something that normally belongs on a railway. But the train crash still had one advantage. It involved a relatively small group of characters. The next scene had almost the entire Marvel universe. Number 2, Avengers, Endgame, Final Battle, $60 million. Years, Marvel had been building toward one moment. Then it arrived. Captain America is standing alone. The battlefield is quiet, and suddenly portals begin opening behind him. One hero appears, then another, then another. Within seconds, the battlefield is filled with characters audiences had followed for more than a decade. The scale alone was enormous. But the visual effects challenge was even bigger. This wasn't one hero fighting one villain. It was an entire army. Heroes needed to interact with digital environments. Digital armies needed to fill the background. Powers needed to work together. Explosions had to interact with characters. And the camera had to move through all of it. Published estimates put the final battle at approximately $60 million. But Marvel has not publicly released an official line item budget for that individual sequence. So $60 million is best treated as a reported estimate. Still, the reason such a number is believable becomes obvious when you examine the scene. There are dozens of major characters. Each has different costumes, different powers, different digital requirements, different interactions. The visual effects teams had to make the battlefield feel like one coherent physical place. And then there was the emotional responsibility. This wasn't simply a big fight. It was the payoff to the Infinity Saga. Every major character had to feel important. Every entrance had to land. Every shot needed to balance spectacle with storytelling. That's incredibly difficult when the screen is packed with heroes. And then Marvel added one final challenge. The audience already knew what these characters could do. So the battle had to feel bigger than anything before it. That meant more characters, more destruction, more environments, more digital work, and more time in post-production. The reported $60 million estimate is enormous. But the final entry makes even that figure look small, because the next production wasn't creating an army. It was recreating one of the most famous disasters in human history. Number 1, Titanic, sinking of the Titanic, $141 million. The ship is already in trouble. But now it begins to tilt. Passengers run across the decks. Furniture slides. People lose their footing. And the largest ship in the world begins disappearing into the Atlantic. James Cameron didn't want the sinking of the Titanic to look like a miniature. He wanted the audience to feel trapped inside it. That required enormous physical sets. It required water. It required hydraulics. It required stunt performers. And it required visual effects working together with all of them. The production built a massive partial replica of the Titanic. The set was constructed so sections could move. That allowed the filmmakers to create the increasingly steep angles seen during the sinking. But moving a giant ship set is only the beginning. Once the deck tilts, everything on it has to respond. People fall, furniture moves, objects slide, water rushes through spaces, and every element has to look connected. That's where the production's complexity exploded. The filmmakers needed enormous water tanks. They needed stunt teams. They needed safety divers. They needed hydraulic systems. They needed visual effects artists. And they needed the physical sets to survive repeated takes. According to widely circulated estimates, the sinking sequence and associated work cost approximately $141 million. But there's an important warning attached to that number. It isn't a publicly released studio accounting figure. It's a reported estimate that has been repeated by multiple entertainment publications. So we should treat $141 million as an estimate, not an officially confirmed cost. Even with that qualification, the scale remains extraordinary. The entire movie reportedly cost around $200 million to produce. That means the reported sinking estimate represents a huge portion of the film's total production cost. And that's why the scene feels different. The filmmakers weren't simply showing a ship sinking. They were recreating a disaster that happened more than 80 years earlier. Every detail had to convince you. The ship had to feel massive. The ocean had to feel endless. The people had to feel vulnerable. And the sinking had to feel irreversible. Then came the most difficult part. The audience already knew how the story ended. There was no mystery about whether Titanic would sink. Everyone knew. The challenge was making you feel the disaster anyway. And that's exactly what the sequence accomplished. The ship slowly tilts. The lights disappear. The decks become almost vertical. People cling to anything they can find. And the ocean takes control. That's what makes the reported $141 million figure so striking. A huge portion of the money wasn't buying something audiences could simply identify. It was buying realism. Water behaving correctly. A massive set moving correctly. Performers reacting correctly. Visual effects extending what couldn't be physically built. And hundreds of separate details working together. The final result lasts only minutes. But those minutes became some of the most recognizable images in movie history. Which scene surprised you the most? The $15 million flying bus? The $40 million Agent Smith fight? The $60 million Avengers battle? Or the reported $141 million Titanic sinking? Tell me your pick in the comments. And if you enjoy stories about Hollywood's biggest stunts, risks, and productions, subscribe for more. Because sometimes, the most unbelievable scene on screen required the most unbelievable work behind it.